Hello, Woods Edge family. My name is DeLeon Bennett. I serve as one of the elders here at Woods Edge, and we are joined by a wonderful panel today that very shortly I'll introduce you to. And the reason that we have come back together for a second real talk set of panel discussions is to discuss policing. We know that this is yet another of very sensitive topics, elements of our society today. And we want to, with the love of Christ, come together and talk again with the heart of Christ about some issues. So we are, since George Floyd's murder, protests calling for reform have been going on, and some have become violent and have led to clashes with law enforcement. While many people are talking about police officers, there seem to be very few talking to police officers. So what we wanted to do is create an opportunity to hear from our local police officers and to allow them to hear from us. So we're grateful tonight not only to have our racial reconciliation ministry leaders, Michael Thompson and Duncan Bennett, sharing with us, but also our three active duty officers who all are members of Woods Edge sharing with us as well. We are joined by Sandy Sanchez, Eric Burse, and Dwayne Burrell. We'll have them introduce themselves in a moment. But just before we begin, I would like to say that I, as has Michael, as has Duncan, we've all spoken to many members of our Black and Brown community in Woods Edge. And I can say unequivocally, everyone that we know, that we have talked to, supports our police officers. We are very grateful for the service that you provide to our community. So with that stated, I'll turn the floor over to Michael for a brief introduction.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Michael Thompson, and I'm not only just a member of Woods Edge, but also one of the co-leaders of the Racial Reconciliation Ministry. And it is definitely a blessing to be on the panel with the other police officers to hear their perspectives.
Hi, everyone. My name is Duncan Bennett. I am the other co-leader of the Racial Reconciliation Ministry. Also very happy to be here and participate in this discussion.
Hi, I'm Sandy Sanchez, and I am a police officer. I've been in law enforcement since the 80s, and I am very blessed to be on this panel also.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Eric Burse. I'm a proud police officer in the state of Texas, and I am glad to be here. You know, you said something that was very interesting. Everybody's talking about the police, but no one's talking to the police. So I'm excited to be here and look forward to it. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Dwayne Burrell. I've been in law enforcement for 43 years. Thanks for having me, and I look forward to answering some of your questions.
Excellent. Well, let's jump right into it. So we're going to start with a super heavy question. That one is, how did you get into policing?
I got into policing because I always wanted to be a judge. I always thought there was the criminal justice system was broken, and I thought by being a judge I could fix at least one thing. And I was offered the opportunity to go through the police academy, and I realized that's where my passion is. That's where I get to interact with people and I can help people, and that is where my calling was. So I've stayed in law enforcement. I still believe that the criminal justice system could be reformed or changed, or it's still broken. Every system has its broken pieces.
Very good. Me?
Go ahead, Eric.
Well, I grew up wanting to be a professional football player, and we all know the percentage of that happening. My second choice was to be a police officer. I grew up in the city of Los Angeles, believe it or not, and I saw the police all the time. And I was raised to respect and understand what the police did. And it was just something that intrigued me as a child, something that I wanted to do had I not been able to do something else. And I'll do it to the day I die.
Okay, I guess it's my time. It's funny that that question was asked. I went to college and I was kind of like Eric. I thought my football career would take off, but when I got to college, it was much bigger and much faster. And I realized then that I probably had gone as far as I was going to go. So my roommate and I, we sit down one night just chatting, and we all decided that we needed a paycheck instead of checking money. So we all applied to be police officers across the state. It's been a rewarding career for me. I've been with DPS. I stayed with DPS for 42 and a half years, and I'm retired, stayed at home, got bored, and had to find something else to do.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. Well, thank y'all for sharing. And now we will hit a question that really is a topic of discussion in our community. What do you believe is the effect of racism on policing?
I think that racism is there's racism within every person, within every entity. Everybody has biases and prejudices. And I believe that the media has just really blown out of proportion what the racism with police. My 25, almost 30 years in law enforcement, I've never seen it like the media's portraying it. I don't think it's at all like everybody believes it is.
I'm going to follow behind Sandy a little bit. It's definitely not helped for the media-wise standpoint, but I don't just want to blame everything on the media. The question is, do we believe it affects racism in policing? The way things are put up right now, yes. But can we change? Can we make it different? Yes. But there is definitely a large proportion of it is how it's depicted, how we look at things and how we view things now. Social media, we look to news, we go to every instance we can to get this information. And if we're not careful on how we decipher it and where we choose to get our information from, we can become a victim of something that we didn't even know we were a victim of, if that makes any sense. So I agree. Yes, it's a large portion, but there's other things that can be done, and we'll go into that later.
Thank you. I think there is racism, but I think that news media plays a major role in blowing things out of proportion. People on both sides have become obsessed with media and what they tell, and nobody really knows what the truth is. But it goes back to something we talked about earlier. In America, you're innocent until proven guilty, and I think that people have to wait and let cases go through the court, and decisions should be made there.
But I also agree that that racism and bias are in every system and everybody, and it's how we choose to respond. Do we choose to push back against our own biases, in favor of other people, you know, which is sort of why approaching this with the love of Christ makes all the difference in the world. And it's what happens on a day-to-day basis in everybody's job, you know, not just in policing, but as you interact with people on a day-to-day basis, how are you going to treat them? How are you going to handle them? And I think it comes up there. The concept of the media and blowing it out of proportion. I think that right now, you know, from a technology standpoint, we're in a place where for the first time, like everybody's got cell phones, they're all recording. You've got the ability to live stream at any moment. And I think that is causing the view of this to be elevated. And I definitely agree that there are times when all the media sources are sort of vying for attention, and so you'll see the things that are that will grab people's eyes, and so in a lot of cases they're promoting things that aren't necessarily positive or even balanced. But I also think that we're just getting to the place where the average person has the ability now to elevate something where before they didn't. Before everybody was walking around with a cell phone in their hands, they just couldn't get that information out. You were left only to word of mouth for those things, and often that just didn't go very far.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that, speaking personally, I think one of the reasons why I was so interested in speaking to police officers about what's going on with racism and policing is because, you know, I only see it from one side. You know, I see it from not only my past experiences, but what I see on television as well. And so I do think that, as other people said, racism exists everywhere. And so that's why it's so important that we have these discussions. But at the same time, in addressing racism, we need to make sure that we're open to everyone's perspectives, because I cannot judge police officers when I've never stepped in the shoes of a police officer. Because really what I'm doing, if I do that, then I'm pretty much guilty of the same thing that I'm accusing other people of doing towards me. So, you know, I admit that for a very long time, you know, I had a certain, you know, perspective, even made judgment calls about police officers based on what I've seen on television, what I've seen in my own life. But, you know, at the same time, we have to be open. We have to broaden our perspectives, I believe. And the only way that's going to happen is that if we sit down and actually hear what's really going on from the people who live that life every single day. And that's the only way that we're going to appreciate each other. And that's the only way we're going to move forward. As far as race, I mean, that's one reason why I'm so appreciative of Sandy and Eric and Dwayne, because they have been bold enough to give us their perspective. And even if they give, you know, their opinion that may not be a popular opinion, you know, they are sharing their experiences with us so that we can learn more. And so I think that we need to get to the place to where we are not judging people based on our narrow perspective. We really should be judging people at all. We really need to just sit down and learn and listen. And we may see that in many cases, we're more alike than we are different.
Excellent. Excellent. And I'm actually I'll take a point of privilege and use something you said, Michael, there to introduce this next question. And the thing that I'll use is that concept of us coming together and talking and getting to know one another. For those viewing this panel, understand that this discussion is a continuation of discussion. This set of panelists has actually come together and sat on a couple of occasions to get to know one another more and to talk through different mindsets, which is what we're asking. Now, part of the reason that I say that, this next question, I think, will to some seem very controversial. What we wanted to do is have genuine, authentic discussions about what is being discussed in our communities and really deal with them, but again, from a point or perspective of Christian love. And so this next question, the statistics show that Black people are 13% of the population, but 28% of those killed by police since 2013. If not racism, what do you think is the cause for this?
First of all, with the statistics, it's hard to talk about statistics like that because when I took statistics in college, you can twist the numbers however you want them to really show up. As far as they're saying that 26% of the population of Black people are being killed, or that are being killed by police are 26%. I think the real question should be, is why are we having so many encounters with them? What's going on in the society that's making us have so many encounters with them, as opposed to making it a racial thing?
Sandy, I'd just like to say, I think that's actually a really good point, and one that's been discussed in other sessions that I've seen. It speaks to where policing is being focused. They've had a lot of conversation about the idea that using sort of big data to determine where they place police officers, and the concept that this area that's sort of designated as a higher crime area, it seems logical. Okay, so let's place police in those areas, and they'll tend to be lower socioeconomic areas of a city. And then by doing so, what happens is the people in that area end up having more encounters with police officers. And there's also the concept of when police officers are there to interact with people to prevent crime, and so that you sort of have to have a higher number of interactions with the people that you're around in policing, and it also speaks to this concept that I've heard a lot of police officers come out in support of community policing, right? Where a police officer will work in the neighborhood they live in, and thereby they'll have greater connection to the people. So it's in that policing, then it's not just I'm trying to stop you. It is I'm also trying to get to know you so that so that the police officer can then influence change of behavior without necessarily trying to take somebody to jail, that sort of thing. So I think there is a lot to be said for where we're placing police officers and how those decisions are made.
Great. Duncan, I knew this was your question because we talked about this earlier.
Right.
But both of you raised good points. But, without, and I don't want to seem in any kind of way, but remember we talked about, Duncan, hey, we can get statistics from everywhere, but are we fact checking where we're getting our information? We look at a headline, we see something, and we immediately go, wow. And then we read the story and we make a perception in our minds. That's good, that's bad, or how could this happen? Well, let's sit and really look at, I said, well, I disagree with that data because data that I received shows something different. And so it says statistics show that Black people are 13% of the population, but 28% of those killed by police since 2013. How many is too many? One. Okay? I don't care what color you are. One. But here's the big question. Who's the 72%? Who's the 72%? Who's the bigger portion? Because we only got 28% of minorities since 2013 of black people. Where's the other 72% go? Who are they? And then that's why I was telling you, I believe that the numbers, we have to be careful on how we look at this and how we let people shift things and make our perceptions go, oh, wow. But like I'm saying, don't get me wrong. One is too many for me.
Yeah.
But if it's 28% out of 100, my question is, I like to look at the big picture. Well, who's part of the 72%? Who's these other people? If this is only 28%, who's the rest? So we need to be careful with that. But if not racism, what do we think that causes this? And we go into, there's a plethora of things. But Duncan, you put it, you hit the hammer on the nail at one part, and that's with, and we talked about this as old school policing, to where we need to get our foot patrols back into the neighborhoods that have high crime. Right now we're patrolling them, all right? And when things go bad in these high crime areas and we deal with it, now all of a sudden, based on media rating and everything else, if they want to high profile this, they high profile it. But let's look at some of the shootings where police and officer involved shootings where, I mean, it was just flat right out. This was a bad guy and nothing said about it. Well, if this was a bad guy doing bad and going to do harm to someone else, we need to talk about that as well. And I'll end with that. But good point, Duncan. You really did make a good point at the end. Thank you.
Can I add one more thing to all this? As far as if it's not racism, what is it? I don't think I really answered that one. And like you mentioned earlier, it's our opinion and from our experience. Part of my opinion is a lot of the lower income communities are controlled by the government with the welfare, with the food stamps, with Medicare, with phones, that the government gives them just enough to survive, but not enough to become better. And if they try to become better, then the government cuts them off. And so the vicious circle just continues and continues and continues. And that's why one of the reasons I believe that you're constantly having the high crime rate in the inner cities and in the lower income communities is because the government controls them.
Okay, I'd like to follow up a little bit on what Sandy said. And just from the welfare, it creates other crimes in that area. Those are high crime rate areas. So that's where most of your calls come from, for services, police officers. So that's where most of them go. So, and you get the smorgasbord of policemen working that area because of the calls are so high. And then just for officer safety, the more officers, the more better. And the safer it is for everybody. But the high crime areas is one of the reasons I think for some of the shootings. But again, media blows it out of proportion. And who is that other 70% that Eric spoke of? And I guess just to simplify it, where there's a lots of crime, there's trouble. Or where there's trouble, there's lots of crime, and there's going to be policemen because that's where all your calls are going to come from.
Okay, well, we're going to bring an end to this session. But in a closing statement, I do want to say this. Some people, when watching this recording, they may wonder, why is the church talking about these issues? Well, the reason why the church is talking about the issues is because the church does not want to be like the rest of the world, because the rest of the world tends to dismiss opinions of others as a way to avoid looking at our own faults. I take your attention to Psalm 139, and it says, "Oh, investigate my life, O God, find out everything about me, cross-examine and test me, get a clear picture of what I'm about. See for yourself whether I've done anything wrong, then guide me on the road to eternal life." One of the hardest things to do is to take inventory on ourselves. And we often avoid this because the truth about ourselves is not easy to confront. Sometimes we avoid listening to other perspectives because something they say might cause us to examine our own biases. And because of this, we continue thinking the same thoughts, having the same narrow perspectives, making the same judgments, and even having the same feelings toward each other. But God expects better from his children. God knows that he sees and he knows what he can do through us if we are honest about the things that are in our minds and hearts. So as we move into the next sessions and as we listen to different perspectives, let's not listen to find arguments that may strengthen our own beliefs or arguments that can deserve a rebuttal. Rather, let's use this time to see what others see and then determine how our perspectives need to broaden and how our thinking needs to change. Because once we examine our own lives, God can use us to impact the lives around us. Stay tuned for session 2.
Hi, welcome back. My name is DeLeon Bennett, and I serve as an elder here at Woods Edge. We're excited to have this all-star panel back for our second session of our second Real Talk panel discussion, which focuses on policing. Now, we pray that you were able to join us for session 1. If not, we encourage you to go and check it out, whether you pause now and go give it a look, or if you go and check it out after this. We just encourage you to benefit from all of this discussion that has been had by this panel. We are joined by Michael Thompson and Duncan Bennett, who are the co-leads for the Racial Reconciliation Ministry. And we also are joined by brothers and sisters of our law enforcement community. And so we're joined by Eric Burris, by Sandy Sanchez, and by Dwayne Burrell, and they'll give a brief intro momentarily. Today we're having the second session, and as I mentioned, that we're focusing on policing. And since George Floyd's murder, protests calling for reform have been ongoing, and some have become violent, leading to clashes with law enforcement. And while many people are talking about police officers, there seem to be very few that are talking to police officers. And so what we wanted to do is create an opportunity to hear from our local police officers and to let them hear from us. And so you're joining us in a true discussion. We are very grateful for the participation of all of these panelists. And allow me to say, before we launch into the second session and its intros, that we've spoken, as we mentioned before, to a number of those in the Black and Brown community of Woods Edge. and all of them overwhelmingly expressed their support of our police officers. We are grateful for your commitment. We are grateful for your service. And we're grateful for you joining us so that we can discuss some difficult and sensitive topics, but not in a way that's divisive. Instead, we seek unity, even if we don't have uniformity, so that we can adopt the lens of Christ as we carry these, well, daily living forward. Michael?
Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Thompson, member of Woods Edge, and also one of the leaders of the Racial Reconciliation Ministry.
Hi, my name is Duncan Bennett. I am the other leader of the Racial Reconciliation Ministry and member of Woods Edge.
Hi, I'm Sandy Sanchez, and I am a police officer in Harris County.
Good evening. I'm Eric Burse, a police officer, proud police officer in the state of Texas, and I'm also a member of the Woods Edge Church, and I am glad to be here.
Good evening, I'm Dwayne Burrell. I'm a police officer for 42 and a half years, going on 43. I'm proud to be here. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, let's dive right back in, picking up where we left off. We've had some great discussion. And so I'll tee this question up. Do you support identifying other organizations to reduce police work effort?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Mental health is a huge issue. First of all, in Harris County, probably I can't speak for the rest of the state, but I do know in Harris County, there's very little mental health available. And yet we get called out and say someone's having an episode. We, as police officers, we are introduced to mental health, but we are not experts in mental health. And I think experts should be going to deal with these mental health people, not the police. There's also, like you hear other on the media and stuff about social workers. We get the calls that we get. I've even had calls that my kid won't do their homework, which I don't believe a police officer should be having to go to a call like that. I think a parent should be parenting. But yes, I believe that there are some areas where law enforcement don't really belong.
Good. I think yes and no. And here's why. Yes, especially Sandy, that's a good deal. Mental health, without a doubt. We need officers that are trained to deal with that aspect. And it's important. But creating an organization, and the reason why I say yes and no is this, is what is it that the organization's primary mission, what is it? What is their function? I do not want to send someone into a situation to reduce police work and put them into a situation to where they're harmed. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Yes. I am all for organizations that come up with better video, body cameras for police officers to do the job, to be more transparent, better ways to come up with use of force as far as we created this instead of a lethal use of force, we've created this as a non-lethal use of force. That way we can deal with people more effectively without the loss of life. So it depends on the organization, but am I for it? Yes. But do I want to put someone into a situation where I say, hey, you know what? You're not going to answer these particular types of calls. We're going to send in our community law enforcement people to come in and take care of that. You've got to be real careful. So that's how I stand on it.
Okay. My answer is yes. I would prefer that a lot of the agencies get the best training with all the latest technology. I'm not for just any individual going in on a call where there's mental health and Bob. I know that Montgomery County probably has one of the better mental health units. It's the constable's office out of Precinct 1, and they're pretty active, and they go all over the county. And I've heard nothing but good things about them. As far as the other training, yeah, I mean, we've got some of the latest technology out there. I've seen technology come a long way since 1963 to help with work.
I think
Excellent.
it's great to hear police officers talk about this. I think that there is a sort of a narrative that's being spoken right now. It is unfortunate that somebody decided to name this concept, this other concept of defund policing, which says a bunch of stuff that most sane people would never want, because then they start talking about getting rid of police. But I've never heard anybody, in the community, in my family, and Woods Edge, and anybody else I talked to that wanted to get rid of police. That's just crazy. But this concept of not requiring police to do so many things that then you're just spread everywhere and covering everything, and so this concept of having other organizations that can provide support, of mental health being one of the big ones these days, and even now as we get into sort of drug enforcement, and how it's being looked at more as a health problem, than as a crime problem, when we start talking about opioids and things like that, and then having different groups to come and interact with people when those things come up is really important. And so it's good to hear that police officers are open to having other people in those areas.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking along the same lines, because I know I don't think about it often. I'm pretty sure a lot of people who are not in law enforcement think about, how far police officers are stretched, not only physically, but emotionally, mentally, on a daily basis. And so the things that they have to deal with, I cannot even imagine dealing with some of those things that range from domestic violence to, like Cindy said, a child not doing their homework. I mean, you can't be an expert in all of those fields, and there's no way that you can be effective all the time if you're constantly being stretched like that. So I think that's an idea that I'm really surprised hasn't grown over the years. Really surprised that police are not getting more support in that area, just because of the fact that psychologically it's got to be an overwhelming job to know that one day you can be one moment you can be dealing with something really small, and the next moment your life is almost in danger. So, for the psychological impact, I mean, police just need not only our help, they just need the help of other organizations, other experts, and not just be relied on to just do everything.
Can I touch on something else, just on something that you talked about? This day and time, policemen need a lot of emotional support, and some of them need to see some of the psychiatrists or whatever, just for the issues they deal with. And personally, what I've dealt with mostly, these issues are drug-induced issues, and that's why you just don't need some other person to go there that hasn't been trained, or to go there and to not be a police officer. With all the new psychedelic drugs and all the stuff that these people are using now, you just never know how the body's going to react, and that's where a lot of the problems come from. And they're just unresponsive to policemen, so you get nowhere.
Interesting. So I want to take one word and make a segue out of it, and that is support, but from a bit of a different lens. How can we as a community show our support for good police officers while also showing our support for the lives of Black people?
I have a hard time answering this question because I guess it was the way I was raised, is that you treat others as you want to be treated. So I've always treated people, okay, not always. For the most part, I treat people the way I want to be treated. However, I have been, if somebody gets rough with me, then I mean, we all do it. If somebody comes at you rough, then you're going to go back rough. But I've always been told and taught to treat people as I want to be treated. So I have a hard time saying with how do you support Blacks when our support police and Blacks? Why can't we just support everybody? Why can't we just stand behind one another? So I don't know how to answer that question.
You know, I'm glad, DeLeon, that you came back to this question. I thought we were going to miss it. And the reason why, this is my favorite question. And I just want to read it out to make sure that the viewers understand the question that we're talking about. You know, how can we as a community show our support for good police officers while also showing our support for the lives of Black people? And Sandy, the reason why you have a problem answering that question is it's kind of easy. We're Christians. We love everyone. That's it. We love everyone. And I think what they're trying to say is, how do we do this during this time and still show love? Well, number one, we show love to everybody, even our enemy. Do we not? We do. Okay. We keep our grass cut low so we could see the snake, but it didn't say we didn't love the snake. It didn't say we didn't welcome. That's not what it is. Bottom line is, the reason why it's so hard for you to answer was the same way it was for me. And then I figured it out because, and my wife says this all the time, we're Christians. You Christians, you're supposed to love everyone. And that's what it is. We love everyone. And by loving everyone, you show support. Hey, I'm not against you because of what color you are or who you work for. I love you as a brother. I love you as a sister. And I will love you as long as you let me love you. And that is how we get through this. We love each other and we show support. Because I'm going to tell you something. We look at the TV and we as police officers go, wow. But Dwayne, you, Sandy, we know, we go out, we're in uniform, and how many times during the day does someone come up just to let you know, hey, thank you for what you do, and I appreciate it. That is what keeps me getting up every morning, put my uniform on, and getting out there. Let alone, not least, not last, but the love that I have for everyone, including my enemy. And that's hard sometimes, but that's it. You treat everyone the same, period.
I agree with Eric. I think that all lives matter. Uh, Police officers don't like criminals, and that's where a lot of the issues come in. And if you look at myself, you look at Eric, you look at Sandy, we in this job for the money. It doesn't pan out in the end. So a lot of it is dedication. When somebody walks up to you and tell you thank you for what you do, even the little kids, it means a lot.
Mm-hmm. It means more than you'll ever know. And that's the one thing that keeps me going. I hear it every day. Don't stop saying it, especially now.
All right. So, first of all, I want to say we appreciate you. We love y'all. Keep doing what you're doing. We need you. Right? There's absolutely no doubt about it. One of the things that strike me with regard to this question is, give you an example. I have on my block At the end of the block, there's a neighbor who put up a Black Lives Matter sign. That neighbor is white, by the way. Across the street from me I have two guys, one of them white, one of them black. The black guy's a ex-military, who put up a sign that said, "We support our local law enforcement." And when I talked to my neighbor across the street, he said he did that in response to the Black Lives Matter sign. And I said to him, how does support for your local police contradict a sign that says Black Lives Matter? How come a yard couldn't have both of those signs in it at the same time? To your point of, we love everybody. Why can't we love everybody? And Sandy, you said something to me in one of the discussions that really rung out for me. It really struck me when you mentioned that for you, Black Lives Matter meant kill cops. There was a slogan that was "Kill cops, fry bacon" or something like that.
Kill a pig, fry the bacon.
And I had never heard that before in my life, and was offended, And while because I just realized I said the words Black Lives Matter. So just to be clear, as a black man, as a member of Woods Edge, as a racial reconciliation, I do not support the organization that is named Black Lives Matter. They have views that are unbiblical, and so I don't support them. I do support the truth in the statement Black Lives Matter, and the truth of that people who are black, our lives matter, and they should matter just as much as everyone else's. And in this moment, there's a movement going on that is Black Lives Matter, not the organization, the movement around the world where people are just trying to stand up for black people. So that's what we're talking about here. And so I think part of this question is about how can we, in a way that makes sure our law enforcement officers hear us when we say, we love you, we support you, we stand behind you. We also have an issue with the things that are going on in the world today that are unjust. How do we say them both without somebody being confused and missing it? Or Sandy, you hearing when you say it when I say it, that I'm against police because I'm saying I'm for, defending the lives of black people. So I think we need to work harder, because I would have never known that a police officer heard it that way if we hadn't had this conversation.
Duncan, you're doing it now. When you ask that question, how can we? We're doing it now. Your brother said something earlier, and I know it's something that you all share is, for long, we've been talking about the police, but we have not talked to the police. And so, not only are you learning something, we're learning something as well. We had that conversation when we were standing out in the parking lot, and Dwayne and I were shocked when you said, I was shocked when I found out that these police officers actually got in trouble for something that they did, because they don't get in trouble for stuff that they do wrong. And you were serious, and that's how you thought. And we were like, what planet is Duncan from? We get in trouble for everything we get. So what it is we need to change that perception, and we're working on it. We need to understand that everybody doesn't live in the bubble that we live in, that there's people outside of that, and we've got to learn, and we've got to come together. And I think this is it. I think this is just the beginning, and it's going to take some time, but I think we're going to get there.
Eric, just to go on something you said in one of our previous discussions, I think Sandy brought it up, and I'm pretty sure all you all agreed with her as well, when she brought up things such as the George Floyd murder, and she said something to the effect that no one is more enraged about that than police officers. And correct. Quite honestly, I never would have thought of that, because we just don't hear, from police officers when those things happen. And to hear that she explained it, and correct me if I say something wrong, Sandra, but you said that a lot of times when that happens, the target on you all's back just becomes larger, to where when people see you in a uniform, they automatically equate you with someone who murdered George Floyd, and so that just makes your job so much harder. And so, as Eric just said, I never would have thought of it from that perspective, that when you all see something like that, it affects you all in a way that it could never affect anyone else. Because when that happens, it makes your job that much harder. And so that's why, it's so important that, we, as Eric said, we come together and talk and understand and see the world from each other's eyes, so that we can have that empathy for each other. Because if we never had these conversations, we would have just kept on having the same perspectives about each other that we've had for years. And the world, that's where we are right now. The world is constantly shouting at each other, and yet we still haven't sat down to discuss anything.
Excellent. Excellent. I'm blessed just to be amongst the faces in this discussion. And at this point, Michael, I think we're at a great transition for our third session. And so go ahead and take us on.
Okay. So thank you all for joining us for this second session. Powerful conversations, a lot of insight. During this session, we've heard how police officers we must come to realize that police officers are our brothers. They're our sisters. And they need what has been mentioned several times during this discussion: support. Ecclesiastes 4:12 says, "And though a man might prevail against one who is alone, two will withstand him. A threefold cord is not quickly broken." In this world today, we are constantly seeing division. And this division continues to grow because we live in such an either or society. If you support the message of a movement, then you must be against police officers. If you support a political leader, then you must feel this way about certain people. If you support police officers, then you must feel a certain way about other people. This either or society has almost forced everyone to pick a side. And when we all pick a side, we end up standing alone and letting racism and all other type of sins and injustices run rampant. But God created us to live in community. God created us to stand together in his name. God also has allowed us to have different experiences and therefore have unique ways in which we see the world. And that doesn't mean that we're going to agree all the time, and it doesn't mean that we're not allowed to have difference in opinions. But it does mean that our African American brothers and sisters should not feel as if we're alone. Our brothers and sisters from other minority groups should not feel like they're alone. Our white brothers and sisters should not feel isolated. And in this discussion, I'm hoping everyone see how police officers should never feel alone. If we want to please God, let us not allow our differences to cause division. We look forward to continuing this discussion in session 3.
Everybody good?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good. All right, give it 5 more. We'll rock it out.
Still here, great job.
Thank you, Sam. Hi, My name is DeLeon Bennett. I serve as an elder here at Woods Edge. I am hopeful that you have already had or taken advantage of the opportunity to join us for session 1 and session 2 of our second Real Talk panel discussion. If you haven't, feel free to avail yourself of that opportunity or stick with us, participate in this, and then go back and watch those too. We are here today discussing policing. And if you have attended the previous 2 sessions, hopefully you've been as blessed as I, if by nothing else, than this grouping coming together, addressing some sensitive, some would even say volatile topics, and doing it from the love of Christ. Also, while recognizing that we're not all uniform, intentionally not allowing our differences to divide us. So I'm grateful to be able to join, again, I'll say this all-star cast of panelists to dive into some difficult discussions that are happening in our world, but to do it from the lens of Christ with the love of Christ. Since George Floyd's murder, protests calling for reform have been ongoing, and some have become violent, leading to clashes with law enforcement. And what we've seen many people talking about police officers, but it seems that there are not many talking to police officers. So we wanted to create an opportunity to hear from our local police officers and to allow them to hear from us. So you are joining us for discussion. We're grateful, very grateful to have 3 active duty police officers with us who also are members of Woods Edge. We are joined by Sandy Sanchez, by Eric Burse, and by Dwayne Burrell. We also are joined by our Racial Reconciliation Ministry co-leads, Michael Thompson and Duncan Bennett. Just before they briefly introduce themselves, I would like to say once more that I know for Michael Thompson, for Duncan Bennett, for myself, we have spoken to many members, even within Woods Edge, of the Black and Brown communities. And overwhelmingly, and I'll say even unanimously, all of us support our law enforcement officers. And we are extremely grateful for your service to us and to our communities. So with that, Michael, take us away and we'll jump right in.
Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Thompson, and one of the co-leaders of the Racial Reconciliation Ministry. And it is definitely a joy to be on the panel with these other people.
I am Duncan Bennett. I'm the other co-lead for the Racial Reconciliation Ministry. Very happy to be a part of this conversation.
I'm Sandy Sanchez, and I am a local police officer and very blessed to be on this panel.
Hello, I'm Eric Burse, a proud police officer in the state of Texas, and I am overly happy to be a part of this. I've really enjoyed it.
Hi, I'm Dwayne Burrell. I'm a 42.5-year police officer. Glad to be.
All right, so we are going to start this discussion with a topic that has been a very big point of discussion in our communities. Please give us your insights into the cases of George Floyd, Rayshard Brooks, and Breonna Taylor.
Very tough question. Another tough question. When you first watched the video with George Floyd, it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. But once again, I don't. The media only gave that portion. They didn't give the whole thing about from the very beginning of the interaction with George Floyd. And I have a hard time judging or what do you call it? Quarterbacking or what? I don't know what the term is. Guessing on a piece of video. I've always believed that you needed to gather all the facts, all the evidence before you just start throwing things out there and to get everybody going, to make the news. And I think that's what the media did before they gathered all the facts, which made a big outrage within the country. But I don't think that anybody should be judged until all the facts and all the evidence has been brought forward.
All right. You know, Sandy, I wish we could get you into every news station as well with that attitude of, hey, let's get all the facts first before we start disseminating information. But I will say this on your question, DeLeon, about George Floyd. And we're still on that particular one right now, correct?
Yes, sir.
It is, no matter how you look at it, all right, and it's like you said, Sandy, it's disturbing. The bottom line is this very quickly. We have to be careful about how we judge. And that's what I talked about earlier. You know, the bits and pieces that we saw is enough for us to say, hey, not good, bad at all. You know, we will always remember, especially us and everyone else that was old enough to look at that video, we will always remember 8 minutes and 48 seconds. That will stick with you whether you're a police officer or not. 8 minutes and 48 seconds. The bottom line is this: you're a police officer, no matter whether someone is trying to harm you or take your life in the line of duty. As you are enforcing the law, once that person is in custody, if that person starts to say, I can't breathe, or that person is uncomfortable in some kind of way, the transition from law enforcement officer to first responder has changed, and we've all got it. The bottom line is this person, regardless of what's in his system, it's too late to say whatever it is now. It's still kind of wrong, don't get me, and I don't want to quarterback at all. But what I did see, what I didn't see was police officer go to first responder. When that person says, I can't breathe, I don't care if you just shot a bullet at me and then I shot you and now I've got you secure. It is now for me time to provide aid to you. Same thing in war, everyone else. Bottom line is you go from police officer to first responder. And that's all they had to do was sit him up in an upright position. He's already handcuffed. He's not going anywhere. Why didn't you just move him up? He can't breathe. Why can't he breathe? Ask why can he breathe? So you're being looked at. You have to understand that not only do you have body mics, but you have everyone else out there accounting for every position you make. It doesn't matter whether they do or not. You're supposed to be doing the right thing. You go from law enforcement officer to first responder. That was the big problem. I didn't see that.
Right, it's my time. This is my opinion. What was the beginning of the tape?
Mm-hmm.
We saw the end. Terrible video. Makes you sick. That 8 minute 47, 8 minute 48 seconds. More to it than that. Of course, media got out there what they wanted. They got people stirred up the way they wanted. And where we are now. The officer deserves, all of it deserves due process. We just wait it out and see what happens. I mean, I'm not going to try to Monday morning quarterback it either. Been in similar situations, so you just don't know what you'll do as a police officer till you get in that position. A little fear, it makes all kinds of things. So as far as it goes, we just have to wait and see what happens in the end.
So I'll step a little bit out of protocol here, a protocol of just asking questions, and insert one opinion as well. And I should have stated early on in this, all of these are opinions that we are sharing. As a community member, I will confess it is difficult at best in seeing what I call the murder of George Floyd. It's difficult, extremely, to process that anything that occurred before the tape began could justify what we saw afterwards. Maybe it could speak to why he was cuffed. Maybe it could speak to why he was pursued. But when it comes to seeing this officer kneeling on his neck with his hands in his pocket, with that look on his face as this man was suffocated on the street, as a civilian, my mind cannot fathom anything that justifies that. Taking him in, okay, but my mind cannot fathom anything that justifies that. And I think that, for me, for a number of, I can't speak for everyone, but for a number of civilians, is very difficult about George Floyd's murder.
I don't think, and maybe I'm speaking out of line here, but I don't think the three of us are trying to justify what that officer did to George Floyd. I think we're just trying to open the eyes to other things that could have contributed to it. But there's more to the story than that 8 seconds. And I think the people need to know the whole story.
8 minutes.
Or I mean 8 minutes. I'm sorry. You're right. 8 minutes. Because when you flat out, when you murder somebody, there's no it's hard to justify it. But until you have all the facts, like I said, we're not here to try to justify any one of these killings at all. We're trying to give you more facts than what the media is giving you, or open people's eyes to other things that may contribute to that, if that makes any sense.
All right. And I want to jump in real quick, De Leon, because I want to make sure that everybody in the panel understands what you have here right now. Duncan, Michael, you have Sandy, you have myself, and you have Dwayne, and we've all given you 3 different opinions as police officers, okay? And, you know, we can look and tell by one view, well, wait a minute, let me make sure. I gave you one as law enforcement officer turns into responder. I want to make sure that everybody understands what I'm saying. Does everybody understand that? That was not at that point. I mean, it doesn't matter what kind of person George Floyd was or was not. The person is in custody. He's handcuffed. He's not going anywhere. He says, I cannot breathe. Okay. There's several officers around her. He's not trying to go anywhere. Here is the level of policing now that we have to understand. Now we have to go from law enforcement officer to first responder. Meaning, when I said that was, okay, I need to find out why this person says he can't breathe, she can't breathe. They're not going anywhere. What is it going to do? What's the harm in me setting him up, saying on his behind, up against the car, where are you going? Why can't you breathe? And that is the problem the only situation I have. Everything before that, I can't sit and talk about because I wasn't there. But what I can say is, you as a police officer, just like if you shoot a gun at me, all right, and I shoot you back, and DeLeon, you don't die, I can't just lay there and watch you bleed to death. After you yelled at me, I'm going to kill you, you SOB, all right, and you shot and you missed, and I didn't miss, now you're secure. I've got you. I've got the weapon that you used against me, and you're not dead. I don't just leave you there. Guess what? I've got to give you medical attention. I've got to get you medical attention. I can't just sit there and let you, well, Mr. Duncan, you know, you tried to shoot me, but now I'm going to let you die. You try doing that to someone who told you or looked you in your face or who shot at you, and if you've never been shot at, let me tell you something, it's not a good feeling. It's not good at all. But now you've got to save this person's life. If you've ever been in the military, ask them what that's like. It's tough to do. It's hard. But the media won't talk about that, and you won't get all of this. And you've got three different opinions, and I agree with everybody. I agree with Sandy. I agree with Dwayne. We can't do it all, okay? But I'm just giving you my opinion on what I didn't see. Doesn't make it wrong, doesn't make it right. But to a certain extent, when does a police officer turn into the first responder? That is the big question.
When the threat is over.
Exactly. And the threat was over when he was laying on the ground. Sandy, you just took it out of my mouth and said, I can't breathe. And then he calls for his mama. You got to do something. And that is where I think that's where the biggest problem is. You know, hey, all you had to do was check on this guy. Now, had you have checked on him and everything would have been okay, and then he would have died later because of something he may or may not have had in his system, okay, now you have that to work with. But you're a law enforcement officer, and then we have to understand that transition into first responder. That's what we need to get better at. And it's not easy to do. You know, Mike, you had a good question about, or Rashad Brooks and Breonna Taylor, which are two different types of instances, but both tragic. And my question earlier was, I asked the panel, had everyone watched the entire video? And we talked about earlier about the media, how they depict or chop or take a certain part and stick something out there, and then we come up with this own perception. But if you watched the entire video with Rashad Brooks, everything that you hear out there about these police officers came to take an individual and they wind up shooting him, didn't even try to talk to him, didn't treat him like a man or anything like that. None of that's true if you watch that video. And I've seen certain media people talk about, you know, hey, look, he was just intoxicated sitting in his car in the Wendy's drive-thru. Why did they have to shoot him? So you go from he's just sitting in his car drunk to why did they have to shoot him? From here to here. But we don't talk about everything that was in between. But police have a very hard time in dealing with the media or getting in front of a story. The larger your police departments are, the better they are at it. but the majority of the police department's media communications are not good at tackling a story that's gone viral, that's a high profile shooting, compared to what the media says. Your big power, CNN, Fox News, so be it, go on and on. Flip the script and you go into Breonna Taylor, where there was a warrant that was issued for one place that wound up encompassing her home. And that was supposed to be a no-knock warrant, meaning police don't have to knock. They go in, police open the door and move on. That warrant got changed from a no-knock to a knock and announce warrant, all right? Unfortunately, when that happened, the individual inside of Breonna's home started shooting, hit one police officer. In turn, police officers start firing back. Tragically, Breonna struck and she's killed. Two totally different scenarios, both of them tragic. Don't get me wrong. Like I've told you before, one's too many. And yes, I'm a police officer, but I do believe in if you're wrong, you're wrong. But these are totally two different stories that you got to look at. And they happen at a time to where we are engulfed with what the heck is going on? Why is this happening? So that's why I employ you to look into these things deeply before we make judgment and get caught into the whole hoopla. Does that make sense what I'm saying so far? I mean,
Yeah.
Makes
you
sense.
really, the situation with Rashad Brooks is wrong. I mean, and when I say wrong, I mean, he shouldn't have, if he just would have done what you're supposed to do. I mean, I hate to say it. When you look at that entire video, the last thing those police officers wanted was any kind of problem, especially a shooting. But then people say, well, you know what? A taser is not a weapon. This is what his lawyer said. A taser is not a weapon. All right? So why did the police use deadly use of force? Well, let me try to explain that to you differently for you people who are not police officers. Myself, Dwayne, and Sandy are police officers. On our belts, we have all kinds of weapons. We have our service revolver, the whole 9 yards, okay? If you took that taser and you took the taser from my partner and you shot me with it, you could disarm me. And now my weapon is exposed to you. I don't get to go home. I don't get to see my kids. I don't get to see my wife. When we get into a physical altercation with someone, you have no idea what's in our mind. It's not, oh, I'm going to beat this dude's behind. It's, I've got to survive this. I've got to go home. Boxing, wrestling, MMA all have rules. You're fighting for the championship. Is there a rule when you're fighting for your life? Is it? Because you don't see that. But that's what's happening when we're in the bar ditch by ourselves. That's what's happening when the guy is, I'm trying to use my taser and he's going for my gun. Or he gets my taser and he takes off running and then he turns around and he shoots it at me. If I let him go and he's intoxicated and then he goes and he harms your daughter, your wife, your brother, your sister, the preacher in the neighborhood, did I do my job? Did I do what I said we were supposed to do? Protect and serve the community? There's so much more into these things that people don't understand. And a normal person, Duncan, DeLeon, Sam, Michael, you get stopped by the police and you're intoxicated and you go through everything and he says, hey man, you're pretty drunk, okay? You got to go to jail. You say, yes, sir. You don't wait till that last final second. This is my last chance to get away. And then you fight the police. And not only do you fight the police, you're not fighting the police because, hey, they're beating you and they're doing it wrong. This is a false arrest. You're fighting the police because you don't want to go to jail. Nobody's shooting at you or doing any kind of chokeholds to choke you or anything like that. They're trying their less than lethal option, which is a taser, and you take that. And then you go and you run. Then you turn around and you shoot it at the police officer who, and now they say, shouldn't have fired his weapon. Well, do you carry a weapon on your body? There's so much into that. We could go on and on and on, but I'm just trying to get you to kind of put yourself in the police officer's perspective and understand that part and see how hard it is to navigate through that, and then put yourself on the other side with a cell phone and you're able to take it, send it in to the media because the media pays you for it. Good money, all right, whether you're giving the whole truth or not. Because right now it's all about the ratings. And you were there, and that's a great shot. We could use it. We'll send you $10,000. And by the way, DeLeon, Duncan, and Sam, and Michael, don't try to get an extra job and start doing that, just sending it in. Because that won't help us. All right?
Duly noted.
All right. Breonna Taylor's a whole new different thing. That was unfortunate. And I'm not going to try to make it right or wrong, but I can't sit and couch quarterback it like Sandy says. But what I can tell you is there was a warrant for one place that was miles away from her home. But then they said that the packages for the drugs were being sent to her home from the suspect from the other home. Regardless, what makes it bad is you went from a no-knock to a knock warrant, which they said they did, and then shots are fired and police are hit. And so they return fire, and poor Breonna's shot in the middle of that. It's just not good. There's no way around it. It just doesn't look good. But when you look at the whole totality of the situation, not good, not good at all. So those are two different instances that people really need to look at before you sit and you make that judgment call. But not once am I sitting here telling you as a police officer that everything is okay and I support everything, because that's not true. Officers that do bad need to be punished. And there are bad people in this world everywhere. There are bad police officers, there are bad teachers, bad preachers, bad brothers, bad sisters, moms, dads, presidents, and we can just go on and on and on. But police are being targeted as we're the bad ones right now, and we're on the chopping block. I'm done.
Well, I think that I'm next, Eric, but you covered it all. You took up your
I'm
time
sorry,
and my time too. That's okay. That's okay. That's okay. I'm
tired of it.
And I know what you're saying, and you really don't know until you've been put in a position, even where you have to pull your service weapon and you see your life flash in front of you. So those are some scary moments.
To a call you didn't even want to go to.
To a call you didn't even want to go to. So,
I would say on the Rayshard Brooks one, I did, Eric, watch the entire the full length of that video and even the additional footage they got later. And I told everybody that I talked to about that, both officers, especially the first one, but both officers handled him exactly the way you would want to see an officer treat a person.
Thank you.
I was impressed. I really was with the first guy, especially the many times he went back to him and just tried to get him to pull off, and he did
gave him all kind of chances.
Yeah, he did everything.
Hey, you sure you didn't do this?
And the second guy seemed to maybe a little more combative, but not in any way that was negative, not in any way that was harmful or whatever. And it wasn't until that very last moment that Rayshard Brooks sort of shooting the taser over his shoulder, where it just went, you know, horribly awry. The one question that it made me think of is, it seems now that, you know, when a policeman pulls their weapon, that it is not that it is, you know, with the intent to kill as opposed to maybe disable. Like, I wondered, could the police officer at that moment try to shoot him to knock him down, you know, shoot him in the legs, in the butt, something, I don't know. So that, but because he's running away from him, and so the, you know, the idea of shooting a man in the back, just and taking his life in that way. Is there something today that says that police officers don't like try to wound anymore?
So shooting somebody in the back like that, that's a whole different topic that should be addressed, that the public doesn't really realize, that from the time your brain, action is faster than reaction. And so if a criminal is about to do something to you, you see the threat as they're already in motion. Okay? You see the threat. By the time your brain tells you to see it, then your brain tells you how to react. It's a proven fact they could have already turned around by then. They could turn around to take a shot at you and start to run. And by the time you've already reacted, that's when you see a lot of people shot in the back.
And I'll touch on something else, and a lot of people, a lot of the public don't realize that police officers are protected by the penal code. And some of the shootings that you see, and that would be questionable to just the lay person, you know, the penal code covers the police officer, and that happens quite frequently.
Yeah, you're good point, Dwayne. And it not only covers the police officer, Duncan, DeLeon, Michael, Sam, and our viewers, want you to understand something. It also covers you. And a lot of people need to read the penal code when it comes to a use of force and protecting life. Because the beautiful thing about our department where we work for, that is our use of force policy, which is the penal code, which means I have to do everything you have to do. And you, DeLeon, and you, Mike, and you have the right to do everything that I did. Okay? So sometimes, before we get into that was a good question. And I think Sandy and Dwayne summed it up. But that was a great question, Duncan. Do you always have to sit and do that? Well, number one, there's no perfect world. You may intend to shoot one place and you wind up shooting somewhere else. Everybody's not going to be John Wayne. We're just, you know, I'm going to shoot that hat off his head. It don't work that way. All right. And then when you put in motor skills, all right, you lose your motor skills. You ever watch a horror movie and they're trying to get the keys into the car and they can't because here comes the monster? Well, they've lost their motor skills. That same thing happens when you're in a flight or die situation. So that's why we're trained to try to control them, but nobody's perfect. But when that deadly use of force situation comes along, okay, you're taught to shoot center mass and center mass only. You know, when I'm going to shoot him in the leg or you see in a movie, those things just don't happen. But the bottom line is this: when your life is in jeopardy and you're feeling that moment of this is happening, you're into that point to where you are trying to survive, right? And if you look at that, and I want all of you to try and do a ride along with your local police department, because you've got to be able to see what it's like. And every police department has that. And if you go back and look at some of these police or some of these activists that we've taken and put into shoot or don't shoot situations, they come back and say, wow, I didn't think it was that hard. It's not easy.
It's a different world.
It's a different world. But great question, Duncan, because it needs, there is no perfect situation when you're getting ready to discharge your firearm at someone. It's not a pleasant feeling. It's not something that you got time to take and say, you know what, I'm going to shoot this one in the behind.
No,
And
it
just,
is.
I-
It
it's
is.
it's
It is
not,
all. It's all in slow motion, Duncan. It
but
is
it's
all
happening
in slow
so
motion.
fast that, and that's why it takes days for us to come back and do the shooting at the end. But great question, and I'm looking forward to some more later.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to close off this session, and I will say this, that I didn't have too much to say during this session because I was taking in so much that I had never heard before. Just yesterday, I took my sons to the DPS to get their licenses. I had one get their regular driver's license. I had another get his learner's permit. And when we went outside, they were so excited. They held up their copies, and I took a picture of them. And I took a picture of them, but at the same time, as happy as I was for them, there was this sense of anxiety that came up because now I know that they're going to be driving on their own. At some point, I'm not going to be with them. And a lot of these images that we talked about today really went through my mind. But I will say that listening to you, Eric, listening to you, Sandy, listening to you, Dwayne, you all have really brought a peace to me to let me know that um, police officers are there to protect us. And most police officers are there to make sure that our rights are protected, and they're out there to make sure that we are all able to go home. And so when I show this video to my sons, I want to teach them that when you see a police officer, to see them as a human being the same way you are, and treat them with the respect that you want to be treated. And so I don't know what encounters they'll have in the future, but the one thing that I do want them to know is that I don't want them to go into any type of encounter judging someone else. And hopefully that's the message that we all have from these panel discussions, that let's try not to judge. That's a hard thing to do because, as we stated, our minds are cluttered with so many things that the media shows us. But let's try not to judge. Let's try to listen. Let's try to learn. Let's try to walk in each other's shoes just for a moment so that we can understand and grow together as people. We look forward to our next session. We hope that you all join us. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Hi, my name is Davion Bennett. I serve as an elder here at Woods Edge. We thank you for joining us for this, our fourth session of Real Talk, a conversation on policing. Now, if you have not already taken advantage of the opportunity to participate in the first 3 sessions of this, our second panel discussion, I encourage you, avail yourself of that opportunity. I'll tell you, the conversation got so real and was so rich that it pushed us into a fourth discussion. But we wanted to allow that to occur. We felt that that was the Christian responsible thing to do, even in this situation, because as I've mentioned before, what we are trying to do is come together, civilian community, law enforcement personnel, bridge some gaps and have discussions that are happening in our communities, maybe not jointly, that are causing division. And so you've heard Michael and some of the closings highlight, why are we, the church, having this discussion? because this discussion is important. It's happening in our world. And what we want to do is, as opposed to being divided, to come together in the love of Christ, and let's reason together and let's understand one another. And so we have this panel that I've been calling our all-star panel, that's comprised of our racial reconciliation leaders, our co-leads, Michael Thompson and Duncan Bennett, as well as Woods Edge family members that serve as law enforcement personnel in Sandy Sanchez, in Eric Burse, and in Dwayne Burrell. So since George Floyd's murder, protests calling for reform have been ongoing, and some have become violent, leading to clashes with law enforcement. And as we've stated, while we see many people talking about police officers, there seem to be very few that are talking to police officers. And so we are grateful to have these three active duty police officers come to the table and have these difficult discussions with us. Again, our goal is to lead with the love of Christ and to discuss some of these difficult, even at times volatile topics, so that we can be unified, not necessarily uniform, but unified. So we are going to allow each of our panelists to give one more brief introduction, and then we will close out this rich conversation with two more questions.
My name is Michael Thompson, a member of Woods Edge, and also one of the leaders of the Racial Reconciliation Ministry. And it has indeed been a blessing to be engaged in this discussion with my brothers and sisters.
I am Duncan Bennett, the other co-lead of Racial Reconciliation Ministry. I counted a privilege to get to serve on this panel with these wonderful folks.
I'm Sandy Sanchez. I'm a police officer for over 25 years, and I'm very blessed to be on this panel. It has really opened my eyes to a lot of things also.
I'm Eric Burse, police officer in the state of Texas, and I'm glad to be on this panel.
I'm Dwayne Burrell, police officer, 43 years almost. I'm enjoying our panel discussions.
Excellent. So some of you have mentioned that at times you don't feel comfortable wearing your uniform in public. Please share more with us about that.
Sandy, you want me to go first this time?
Yes, sir.
And, we talked about this earlier, and I agree with Sandy and Dwayne. When you look at the television, when you look at the news, and you see how sometimes police officers are being depicted, especially in a negative way. And even if these officers had done something wrong, and without a doubt, it is wrong, we're held to a higher standard. We're held to a different standard. And at one point, it was kind of hard to put the uniform on. But like I said earlier, the one thing that gets me going is I sit and I look at my TV and I'm going, oh my goodness. But then I go outside and I meet people, lovely people who say, hey, you know what? Thank you for what you do. And we're here for you. And that lets me know that not everybody is just seeing the bad and taking the bad and saying, hey, you know what? You're wrong. Because if I did that, if I saw an individual for the color of their skin or whatever they drove, I stopped one individual. I stopped someone who looks like Mike, and I have a bad encounter with Mike. Then the next car I stop, just like Mike? I'm supposed to think that they're going to be the same kind of person? What are we doing? We're doing that exact same thing. There are bad people, and that's it. And it's, you know, for someone who wants to put the uniform on and be acknowledged as that person, to be there to help people that need to be helped and protect people that want to be protected, hurts when it's not shown that way. It hurts. It really does hurt.
Well, I'll go next, Eric. You're doing such a fine job. Like I said, you're taking up my time, but
I ain't
really
taking your time up. You got plenty.
I really hadn't had an issue with the uniform. That's something I'm proud to wear, but I do miss my Texas tan, you know, day in and day out. But you know, I'll get past that. But I haven't had an issue with the uniform, and maybe that comes from being in law enforcement so long, and my experience. You know, like this, they come and go. I do recall back in the 70s when I first got into law enforcement, it was the Joe Campus tourist deal in the city of Houston where he had been mistreated. So, you know, everybody was up in arms in Harris County in Houston because he was handcuffed and thrown in Buffalo Bayou, and that's where they found him a day or two later. So it was something similar to what's going on now, just a little rebellion, and there were riots and stuff in the city of Houston, and it went on for several months, and it finally subsided. So, but that's pretty much all I have to say about that. I know that Sandy had expressed some issues with her and her uniform. I'd like to hear what she has to say.
When all of this started with George Floyd, and when I was on duty in uniform with my patrol car with my fellow police officers, and I was doing my job, you know, I'd walk into a store and you could just feel the tension and the look in each other's eyes as we looked at each other. Do you hate me? Do I hate you? You know, do you hate me? And everything. And when I could see that and feel that, I would have to, it was in me to break the tension. But as things progressed and there became a target on our back, at first I was embarrassed to wear it. Let me say that up front. I was embarrassed. When an officer does something so heinous, it hurts every officer. It tarnishes our badge. And the good cops take great pride in their badge, in who they are, in the uniform that they wear. But then you know, sometimes I would stop on my way home to get a loaf of bread or get dinner or whatever. But with the target on my back, I was ashamed. I was embarrassed. I was scared for my kids. You know, we adopted twins, and it's like, how do I protect them from this hatred in this world because of what I wear? And when I put it on to do good, not to do bad, and so yeah, therefore up until recently, I had a hard time being in public in my uniform when I was not on duty. But since then, I've been praying and I'm proud to wear that uniform, and I will continue wearing that uniform and take pride in my uniform.
No,
Excellent. Go ahead, Mike.
yeah, sorry about that. But I was just listening to you all speak about that as far as really being judged because of what you're wearing, a uniform. And you know, so many people look at the uniform and are just not able to see the person inside the uniform. And I think a lot of times police officers are not even seen as people. And I know that, you know, just for, you know, admission, there's been several instances that have happened. And And I think that I've probably been guilty of looking at police officers in a negative light, just because of, as Eric mentioned one time before, I saw one police officer do one thing, and so I began to identify all those police officers with that one individual. And it requires a change in heart. It requires a change in mind as well, so that, we're not looking at people because of the uniform that they wear, or because of, or we're not judging someone because of the message they may have on their shirt or their hat, or what type of political organization they're with. At some point, we just got to get past that and begin to look at people as people and realize that, I mean, having this conversation, most people don't look at police officers as people. They don't understand, the hurt and somebody used the word embarrassment, you know, never would have associated that with police officers, but they're people. And so many times we just forget about that.
Before I introduce the final question, and hopefully I'm not going to get myself in trouble here, Sandy, but there's something that you said when we were all getting to know one another, and it touched me, and it allowed me to see more of your heart and the humanness of your heart. And for that reason, I want to share it here. And I think I confessed to you that thought ran through my brain the instant I heard that you had the angst about wearing your uniform. And it was to the extent of, or akin to the thought that you recognized that those feelings that you were feeling about being judged, about having a target on you, about being seen this particular way, because you had that uniform on. You said something to the effect of, you recognized at least you could take the uniform off, and that you recognized that a number of the members of the Black and Brown community have what some would call a uniform that we can't take off, and being unable to imagine what that must be like. And again, that touched me to hear that revelation and hear you express it. And I am hopeful that anyone who has that mindset that I had walking into this is touched in hearing that and understanding that perspective.
Okay.
Oh, okay. I thought you were about to add a comment.
I was talking about something that happened. I'm sorry.
Yes, sir. No problem. So our final question. I am going to read an excerpt from Matthew Horace's The Black and the Blue. A cop reveals the crimes, racism, and injustice in America's law enforcement. And we would like to hear your thoughts on this excerpt. Matthew Horace says, when I started writing this book, a friend, former chief of police in New York City, I told him that I wanted to make a point, and I didn't want to minimize the risk that officers face. While I understand the frustrations of African Americans and others, I want to make sure people know and understand how difficult a job policing can be. My friend turned to me and said, Black people know how hard the job is. What they don't understand is, how is it that we, the police, are never wrong? They don't understand how, in case after case, a person is shot and killed by police, but the police are never at fault. They're never wrong. That was the quote or the excerpt rather, from Matthew Horace's The Black and the Blue. A cop reveals the crimes, racism, and injustice in America's law enforcement.
Who's first?
You can go first.
Yes.
You know, that used to be true many, many years ago. This is 2020. That surely is not true now. Look around, you know, look at some of these police now. Before it's even over with, it's already what? A done deal. But I will say this. Unfortunately, that used to be the way it was. Unfortunately, that's sad. It is. But, you know, Duncan and I, we had a conversation and it shocked me and Dwayne. We were standing outside. He said, you know, I never knew that when these police got arrested for what they did, it shocked me. I was like, man, they finally did. It was like, me and Dwayne were like, what planet is Duncan from? I mean, if you do wrong, you need to be held accountable. And I think it goes back to policing in the community and you can't have a community and not have a police, and you can't have the police and not have a community. They got to go hand in hand. They've got to be together. And right is right and wrong is wrong. And no matter what side of the fence you're on, you need to be held accountable for your actions. So if police are out there doing wrong, you need to be held accountable. And I recommend that you get the maximum because you know better. That's all I got to say about that.
I think policemen should be held to higher standards. I agree with Eric. At some point in time back in the day, I think that did happen because small counties itself, like Montgomery County, when I came here in the 70s, the late 80s or early 80s, it was left up to the police officer if an autopsy needed to be done or not. You know, the JP came out, pronounced the person dead, but and you guys may not understand this, but it's a big deal. An autopsy that can prove a lot. But man, the first time the JP turned around and asked me, "You want to have an autopsy?" I said, "That's not left up to me, is it?" I mean, I was new here, but yeah, it was. So, and I say that to say that yeah, I'm sure there was some killings that were wrong back in the day and time. So it was, but I think with technology now, it's really hard to pull it off. It's just too much technology. You know, the previous agency I worked for, state of Texas, well, you know, I guess you could say they didn't play. They took care of business when it came to issuing out discipline. So things have changed and things are changing. And I'm sure after all of this stuff that has gone on in 2020, they'll change some more, and hopefully for the best.
I agree with both Eric and Dwayne. The one thing that a lot of the general public doesn't realize is nowadays when an officer does do wrong, they are disciplined, whether it be within the department or through the justice system. But if you even take like one of the bigger companies, Exxon or one of the big companies, you don't hear of everybody being disciplined in that company for whatever crime they may have committed. Sometimes officers get fired for breaking policy, not even crime. Do I think that statement is true back in the days? Yes. Do I think it's true to the days now? It's really hard to make it a true statement today, but a lot of people don't see all the discipline that goes on within the department without the media. The media doesn't go on, present all that. And we don't go around saying, hey, did you hear about, telling our neighbors, did you hear about the officer that did this? Because it embarrasses us. So a lot of that is not out in the general public.
And, for those who are not in the police officer's shoes, or like, because I know some of y'all are like, wow, I didn't think about that, or I really didn't see that. And, Sandy, you're right. It's there's a lot that happens in the police force that does not simply get out. You know, I mean, there are police departments that sometimes you feel like, wait a minute, I didn't even get a fair shake at it. No, you're gone. You're out. That's it. Bye. And not only that, you get found not guilty, or this didn't happen, and then you go work for another police department, and then they turn around and say, hey, you know, we looked at it again, and guess what? You got to go. Now you're facing prison time. But those stories just don't get out, because you've got to look at ratings, and you got to look at what's hot, and we got to see what everybody's motivated behind, and what are we going to do while everybody's sitting on the couch? How are we going to present it? And that's the sad part. That's the part that hurts my heart, is that part right there. Is we just fallen into this right now, what's the hot topic thing. And without any thought on what they're doing to the police community and the community itself, without any thought of the aftermath, when a kid decides, I'm tired of looking at police brutality, or someone saying this person is this color and they're getting shot, I'm just going to get my rifle and go to the first person I see and just shoot them dead. Did we not have that just happen? Did we not have that just happen? This kid was tired of looking at police brutality and on the news, and he just decided, I'm going to do something about it. And he shot an innocent man because of what he saw. And it's not right. We have control over this.
I tell you what, this is another one of those areas that has really helped me. You guys are awesome. I coming into this, you know, to Mike's point about the sort of prejudging. I never thought I would hear a policeman say that, you know, policemen were wrong about something, and so, you know, to hear that just makes me know that the narrative that I've been told is not true, and that there is, you know, far more integrity and honesty in this, in the policing organizations than we're being made to believe at times. I think the comments that you made about oversight, I remember Sandy, you shared something about, you know, people, about making sure that there are the right people for the job to begin with, you know, making sure that there's proper evaluation done, because some of these people should have never been police officers to begin with. To hear you guys say stuff like that just gives me hope. It says that that first of all, there's probably a level of awareness in policing that I didn't know existed, and that's a wonderful thing. And that, you know, the things that are changing, that are getting better over time, that there's a lot more people in law enforcement who believe in the right than we ever thought. So I just, you know, I love and appreciate y'all. You've given me a lot of hope.
Yeah, and I just want to echo what Duncan said, because honestly, you know, I'm the same way. The position that you all have taken as far as discipline with police officers, when tonight, and even the discussion we had leading up to tonight, honestly, that was, out of all of the things that you all said, that was the most shocking to me. Because from what, I mean, only thing that I've seen was that when something happens, you know, all police officers stand together, and then whoever did it, nothing really happened to them. And so that's really all we saw. And so that's why it was such shocking, eye-opening, but at the same time, relief of, I felt a lot of relief, because now I know that that's just not the whole story. And so, and that's just, and it's just sad, because that's the only story a lot of us get. That's the only story a lot of us get. And that's really where a lot of the anger comes from. A lot of the anger comes from because we don't see the justice part of it. We don't see the discipline part of it. Only thing we see is what I just described, And that's when the anger comes, the hostility comes, and that's when you take one thing and it just boils over because we're not given the whole story. But thank you all for giving us the story.
Well,
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having me.
thank you.
We definitely, I'll underscore again, appreciate your service. We appreciate being able to come to the table and discuss some pretty difficult questions. And I know that some, just in hearing the questions, will go, well, that's an unfair question. And we talked about some of that ourselves, but you were willing to talk about the difficult questions, even those that sound unfair, because we realize this narrative is being carried in the world, in the communities, but not necessarily with a focus on extending the love of Christ, gaining understanding, and seeking unity. So we thank you for that. To those of you who have joined us for these discussions, we pray that you've been blessed by them. And I'm going to issue an ask. Go and do the same. You don't need a Zoom camera. You don't even need a panel. Let's go and have some of the tough and difficult discussions, but do it with the love of Christ, from the lens of Christ. As you've seen here, it doesn't require quoting scripture during the discussion, as long as we're leading from what we know the Lord has told us. Doesn't hurt to make sure we're leveraging the scripture as well, okay? But we lead in love, informed by the word of God, and tremendous things can be accomplished. Love Jesus, journey together, bring hope to the world. That's what Woods Edge is all about. And we have a mission of seeing the city of Houston become a city of God. This is a step in that mission. We invite you to join us. Let's journey together. Let's bring hope to the world. Thank you.